Sounds of laughter, shades of life, are ringing through my open ears, inciting and inviting me. Limitless, undying love, which shines around me like a million suns. It calls me on and on across the universe.
The Interplanetary podcast, the exploration of space for the benefit of all humankind. Your hosts in England and Norway, Matt Russell and Chris Carney.
Oh yeah, baby Lennon. Hey, it's episode 202, and this week I have a guest host, semi-permanent guest host, Chris Carney. Hi, Chris. How are you this morning?
Hello. I'm very good. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here on this podcast. It's one of my favorite podcasts ever. So thank you. It's so exciting.
We met, I don't know, about 3 or 4 years ago when we bonded over the fact that we just started our own podcasts.
And mine didn't last as long as yours.
In some ways, I felt sorry for you and got you on the show.
I know.
You've got a really cool radio program, though.
I do have one radio show left, which is called Losing My Edge radio show. I have it on Melodic Distraction, which is a radio station in Liverpool. And it broadcasts from there on the third Thursday. No, not a Thursday at all. The third Sunday of every month at 1 p.m. But I also do these podcasts in between, which is just a music appreciation, basically. So I try and do a weekly one of them as well as the monthly show. It's good to be asked to be on someone else's. I will reciprocate.
I'd love to do them. I haven't done a music podcast apart from, like education ones.
How is that even possible? You are like the music man. You come from down our way.
Now, despite the fact that you're from Liverpool, Chris, where are you now?
I am in Jessheim in Norway, and I've been out here for nearly 5 weeks, following my wife like a groupie. And because of the pandemic situation, I've obviously had a reduced work capacity. So I've been out here doing loads of things, really: hiking, cycling, swimming, drinking, stargazing. It was very nice to be out at the family cabin and see a bright sky of stars without much pollution. The likes of Vega. That was nice. But also what was lovely was seeing Saturn, Jupiter and Mars all in the same sky, being able to look at them all almost with your same eyes at the same time, but you have to sort of quickly move to the left to see Mars. So, but yeah, very beautiful over here. But also saw a Tesla Model X drink. Do you say drink if it's Tesla, or does it have to be? But yeah, and it had the registration plate SpaceX. How baller is that?
Wow.
I had to look inside to see if it was actually Elon Musk, but it was a woman. But he's got a lot of money, so maybe he sometimes is a woman.
Remember, he's got several ex-wives, so you never know. That might be a settlement thing.
Exactly.
I'd love to go to Norway and see and do a bit of stargazing. Are you far enough to be able to see the Northern Lights?
No,
the Aurora Borealis.
Yeah, we are just a little bit outside of Oslo, so about 30 kilometers north of Oslo, the cabin. But you're seeing the Northern Lights about another 5 or 6 hours drive north before you start seeing them. I've still never seen them. I've been up north 4 times, but it's never been the right conditions, unfortunately. But Kaya grew up just like using them as her compass. It's just that they were bored of them by that time. It's like, oh God, it's them again.
Bored with the Northern. That's making me sick.
No, I mean, obviously they never get tired of that. They're just obviously an incredible phenomenon that are a huge part of the culture up north. So yeah, hopefully one of my journeys in the future up north are going to be able to get to see them. And my mother-in-law is from Hammerfest, which is the northernmost city in the world. Where obviously that's just like, the whole sky is just Aurora Borealis all the time. And polar bears. No, there's no polar bears. They don't have them. They have them up in a bit higher up though, in that island. What's that island called?
I don't
Geography
know,
major.
But do they ever come down? Is there any chance that the polar bears are going to get hungry and start eating the people of northern Norway?
I think so. I mean, anything's possible. Can I just say though, last week's show with your first guest, Julio Aprea, what a guy, absolutely amazing. And a literal space engineer, beautiful Argentinian accent, works for ESA, and this week he got a Scouse DJ with a drama degree.
Yeah, well, I have gone from two. Julio is talking in his fourth language as well. He comes from Argentina.
Oh my God, it just gets better, doesn't it? I mean,
works in France, lives in Holland, but was talking to me in English. You have to say that is pretty legendary, isn't it?
Makes me sick.
It does actually. It's annoying. But that's the only downside of being English, is that you don't bother learning many languages.
Oh my God,
if at all.
My in-laws just got sick of asking if I'm ever going to learn.
If you do something disappointing, do they have a sort of conversation in Norwegian behind your back in the kitchen? You can hear them muttering.
Well, they can't do that, you see. I can understand. So I can understand everything that's being said pretty much. I just can't converse.
It's amazing, isn't it? If you think about astronauts, that they have to, or did have to learn Russian.
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard to learn a foreign language, particularly once you're an adult.
Yeah. That's the problem.
I reckon if you're training to be an astronaut, there's lots of other things you need to do as well.
Yeah. I mean, just one or two little jobs that you might have on your list. Chores.
We're recording this on Thursday, the 10th of September, and it's Mike Mullane who wrote the brilliant book of, I don't know if you've read it, the Riding Rockets.
Riding Rockets. No, I haven't read that one.
It's quite controversial. He likes to tell all the sort of really juicy, gossipy stories. It's really good.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
okay.
Mike Mullane. Yeah, he was a space shuttle pilot, but also from the Air Force.
Is it on Audible? Because I've got my credit today. I get my fresh credit today to get a book, so maybe
I would think it is on Audible, yeah, because it's quite a big one.
But there's another birthday today. On the time of recording. He's 49 and never been kissed. He's 49 and never been kissed. He's 49 and never been kissed. He's never been kissed on the bum. It's Matthew Russell's birthday.
Yes.
Everyone.
It's my birthday. And I'm far too old. This goes out on September the 11th. And yes. two absolute legends are born on September the 11th.
Oh, yeah. German Titov, who was the fourth person in space, but the second to orbit the Earth, born in 1935 on this day. Wow.
Yeah. No longer with us, but Titov, proper legend. I mean, that is proper legend. But there's Crippen as well, who was born a couple of years later. He's still going strong. Yeah. But he was the person that piloted the very first space shuttle. Which I reckon was maybe even riskier than Gagarin or Titov's, original first couple of flights. I reckon.
Yeah. Like, those guys had to take it up. He had to bring it back. The Cripmeister is like, I've got to bring this sucker back down to Earth. Do you understand that? There's none of your parachutes landing in the sea. You know what I mean? I just imagine Leslie Nielsen just coming in every now and again saying, just want to say good luck. We're all counting on you.
Yeah, I mean, that is particularly, apparently, what my favourite fact about that flight is still that John Young sat next to him.
Yeah.
And Crippen's heart rate is going off the scale at launch, whereas John Young's is just like remains at 80 or something like that. It's just like completely, whatever.
There was absolutely no shaking Young, was there?
Yeah, just no emotion.
No,
it's just another launch. What of it? I've been to the moon. I've done it.
Yeah, done all this. Yeah. Learn Russian.
Oh no, I don't think John Young will have learned Russian. No, they did. I can't help feeling they went to the moon, to stuff it up the Russians.
Yeah,
it was only
completely. That was the whole idea. I mean, you've got sort of Kennedy, we're there in this decade, and it was a wonderful speech and everything. But he's just thinking, I'll show you. I'll show you, Rusky.
I'll show you, you pesky Ruskies.
Can you say Rusky now? You can't say that anymore, can you?
I think I don't know. But, it was all those differences with the Apollo-Soyuz missions were all put behind them, and they've never looked back. The Russians and the Americans have been super friendly ever since.
Oh, yeah, it's been a real bed of roses.
But my favourite birthday of today is Mary Watson Whitney.
Yes.
An American astronomer who was born 1847.
Oof.
22 years the head at the Vassar Observatory in New York.
Whoa, that is amazing. Yeah.
Well, especially amazing considering when she studied at Harvard, you couldn't actually be a woman at Harvard, so she was studying as a guest.
Well, it goes on much later, though, doesn't it? Men taking the credit for the women's work, and there's so many women who deserve this credit, which just didn't get it, And,
no, yeah. Well, I mean, the funny thing about astronomy is, out of all the sciences, it probably has the best track record. There are so many amazing historical figures who are women in astronomy. Obviously, it should and could have been a lot more. But do you know what? We got to give astronomy some credit in the fact that it wasn't as bad as others. and people like Mary Whitney were trailblazers. She was actually the assistant to another legend, Maria Mitchell, who was running the observatory before us. So Maria was even more of a trailblazer.
Yeah.
They had a major position at the Vassar Observatory in New York, 102 scientific papers on things like variable stars, comets, asteroids, those sort of things.
Yeah.
And it was just when photographic plates were coming in, so that's a lot of measurements and computation was done. So yeah, those were exciting times for astronomy as well, the sort of late 19th century.
To think just literally how early we're talking here for a woman to be doing that, and what she probably would have come up against in terms of opposition. The proof is in the legacy, and that's an incredible thing. So I hope the patriarchy went a little bit easy on her in the world of astronomy. I hope the science world was maybe a little bit more forgiving.
It's quite hard to put your brain into the mindset of someone from the 1980s, let alone the 1880s.
Yeah, I know. I mean, in Liverpool, we had the shell suits as well, which was even more difficult to...
Exactly. I mean, if you think about Liverpool in the 1970s... Yeah. While we've been rabbiting on, just to keep people interested, we'll be playing my guest interview with Sarah Cruddas, who's been on the show before. Sarah is a really, really good space writer, space journalist. She's written a new book, Look Up.
Oh, what now?
It's actually called Look Up.
Oh, right. Okay.
Our Story with the Stars.
Yeah, yes. It sounds fantastic. I did a little read up on this, and it just sounds fantastic.
I've got an advanced copy, and I've been reading it. It's very, very easy to read. It's one of those books. It's one of those books where you can probably read it very, very quickly because it's so well written. Don't take my word for it. Check this out. Sarah Cruddas is a gifted writer, and Look Up is an inspired book, and I am hopeful that we'll never stop looking up.
Michael, I can't believe I'm on the same podcast as Michael Collins voiced. That's incredible. And John Lennon.
Michael Collins. Yeah. I mean, during the Apollo 50 celebrations, I think Michael Collins became my favourite character amongst it all. There's something really, really cool about Michael Collins, and he's definitely written an even better book than Riding Rockets. The Michael Collins book is brilliant.
Do you know, me too. I think Michael Collins, what happened during the 50 was that people really pushed him to the fore, and he started to get a lot more of the credit that he rightly deserved. And I do workshops in schools, and often they're about space and stuff like that, and I always emphasize Michael Collins. I always emphasize him because he doesn't just represent the great astronaut that he was, but he represents how the rest of that amazing team are often forgotten about in favor of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. You know, the hundreds of thousands of people that were involved. I think Michael Collins is almost like wears the badge for those guys, because he is literally the number 3 man who was often left out of the equation when people talked about the moon landings. And if anything, I think he was more important. You know, it's crazy. I mean, it's an equal team, of course, but you know, if he wasn't there, they could not have done it. And that's the but yeah, I think through your podcast and through my own sort of reading, and Michael Collins has become my favorite too of the Apollo missions.
Yeah, he's great. He is great. Yeah, so Sarah, it's a really good conversation with Sarah, and honestly, it's a really good book about the importance of space, and it's kind of her love story with space, her own kind of personal story, but also the story of all the people that have been involved and why space is important.
Yeah.
So she talks about all those people like Titov and Crippen. I'm not sure they get I'm not sure they get a name mention actually, but she certainly talks about that type of pioneer and how important they are. But we kind of did that last week as well with people like Lee Solid, just all those people involved, all those absolute legends who worked really, really hard to make all this stuff happen.
Can I just say though, Lee Solid, what a name!
Well,
what a name!
It is an incredible name. I'm working very hard to try and get Lee on the show. It's looking good. So like, it'd be amazing.
That'd be amazing. I'd love to know what else is underneath the seat of his truck.
Anyway, I've been watching Star Trek recently because it's all on Netflix, and I never really watched anything past the original series, and I love the original series. So what I did, I typed in what are the best episodes of all the other stuff, and often it's the mirror episodes.
Right.
So it was funny that you should talk about, that you wanted to talk about mirror matter, because I said, what do you want to talk about? And we haven't had one of these crazy physics deep dives for a while. So I thought, do you know what? Mirror matter might be quite fun.
Yes.
And it was just after I'd watched the original series where Spock has a beard. Oh, it's so good.
Oh, but, Spocky beard. I love the sound of that. That sounds
Spock
brilliant.
Beard. Yeah. No, it's really good. The other episodes from the other seasons weren't so good. But hey, mirror matter.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna do the big deep dive. Back on episode 181, we talked about the kind of why mirror matter has come about, but we didn't actually talk about mirror matter in this one. This was to do back on 181. There was a really, really good piece of research that had nailed down a little bit closer why there's this misbalance between antimatter and normal matter. So there's something not quite right. And I think it might have something to do with this symmetry. A really famous experiment is by a woman called Shan Shong Wu. They noticed that the way that cobalt-60, it didn't decay as they thought it would. So they sort of managed to sort of hold it in a magnetic field, so they're all pointing in the same direction. But for some reason, the way as the electrons come out of the nucleus as part of this decay, they're all firing off in a similar direction, or a bias to this one direction, which you wouldn't expect. You'd expect
not the boy bands.
You wouldn't expect it to be the boy band. It's gone all a bit Harry Styles. No, so the analogy is that for some reason in the mirror image of the universe, physics happens slightly differently. And this was known as violating P symmetry. So this is parity. So there's like the kind of mirror image of things. It's not quite the mirror image, but it's that sort of thing. Remember, that's all an analogy. So since then, they thought, well, here's a bit of a wheeze. If you make these particles antimatter, then you get your symmetry back. So if those particles that are wrong in the mirror, if you make them antimatter, then they're right. Then the laws of physics come back to being symmetrical.
Yes.
But the problem was that in 1964, that was also violated, CP symmetry, charge and parity symmetry, was violated by pesky neutral kaons.
Oh, I hate them.
And the weird thing about that is, it's really bizarre because it's like the universe is almost so perfectly symmetrical, but it's not quite. It's almost like the mystery, but you can bring time in now. And so just like you did with charge, making them antimatters, you can do the same thing with time, time reverse them, and you get your symmetry back. So you get this CPT symmetry, and that's not broken yet.
So this is mind-melting stuff, but it is because the sort of symmetry is important, isn't it? And it's because it's just nearly symmetrical. If it was completely skew-whiff, then they wouldn't be too bothered. But physicists are like, well, it's symmetry seems to be that seems to be a thing. So we need to find a way to bring that back, and that's why these theories come about, I guess.
Do you know what? I think you're right. I think there's a kind of inbuilt Mary Kondo in all these physicists. And they want it they want it to be tidy and they want it to be beautiful as well. So like the standard model of physics just doesn't seem very beautiful. It seems almost random. It's just like, but it could be that's the way it is. There's no sort of underlying principle that it needs to be beautiful or tidy. It might be that particle physics is untidy, but it does seem that physicists and mathematicians are obsessed with this kind of trying to make it neat.
Yeah. But I also might imagine the Marie Kondo sort of effect with the physicist going, hold the particle, just hold it and think, does it bring you joy?
Give it a hug. Well, no, the standard model doesn't seem... They hug the standard model and it doesn't give them joy. So I think they want to throw it out, but of course they need something to replace it. Now, one way round this breaking of P symmetry right at the beginning, because four fundamental forces, only the weak force breaks the parity, right? Now, it was actually Song Dao Li and Chen Ning Yang who won the Nobel Prize for this, because it was their idea, but it was actually, as we just said, Shan Zhong Wu who run the experiment, but for some reason she wasn't on the list for the Nobel Prize, which I think is a little bit mean. You would have thought that the experimentist should have got some recognition, but there we go.
And let's not talk about the choices of the Nobel Academy right now.
No, let's. Well, if you're Richard Feynman, you don't give a monkeys about it. The joy of physics should be just about the finding out.
Absolutely.
And really, the Nobel Prize is irrelevant. I mean, let's face it. How amazing for Li and Yang and Wu that they discovered this lack of symmetry in the first place. I mean, that is pretty mind blowing.
Yeah,
you can go home each night and say, I discovered something that furthered human knowledge. That is a massive claim, much bigger than a Nobel
Sleep
Prize.
like a baby, wouldn't you?
I would sleep like a baby if I'd done that. But anyway, we've kind of recapped just on the background. But the one thing I want to point out is that mirror matter is not antimatter. So this mirror matter is something completely different, and it's there to try and solve this, to try and make things neat. So to try and get rid of this lack of symmetry, parity symmetry, you could invent that every single particle has an exact mirror particle, and that would get round the problem. And this was first discussed by Kobzarev, L. Oken, and A. Pomerunchuk. Their paper was called On the Possibility of Observing Mirror Particles, 1966.
Whoa!
The Russians were totally into this. So, the Oken, I found an article by Oken where he writes about 50 years of mirror particles, and it's really good. It's on archive. But this is what he said. He says, mirror particles cannot participate in ordinary strong and electromagnetic interactions with ordinary particles. The hidden mirror sector must have its own strong and electromagnetic interactions. This means that mirror particles, and I love this bit, like ordinary ones, must form mirror atoms, molecules, under favorable conditions, invisible mirror stars, planets, and even mirror life.
Amazing.
I know, this is ridiculous. Moreover, this invisible mirror can coexist with our own world in the same place. There was a flurry of activity. I know. I'm reading out of the quote now. So yeah,
you know, brilliant. I closed my eyes there. I closed my eyes, and I it was like Cobb said. I was in the room, genuinely.
So now he in that paper he talks about seeing a mirror train going across the landscape and realizing that it needs a mirror globe to hold it onto the tracks, because it needs mirror gravity to hold the mirror particles onto the mirror track.
Incredible.
And would those gravitational things interact? And at the time they were thinking about this in the 60s, but they were unaware of the work of Zwicky, who was, of course, realizing that there must be this thing called dark matter. Now, this is where dark matter comes in, and mirror matter as well, because they might be connected. So the 60s was a bit of a heyday. Then the 70s, it went super quiet when everyone was getting jiggy with quantum chromodynamics and the Standard Model and tau leptons and all those kind of things.
Just buzz theories.
Just, all the... But, I mean, to be fair, these were all theories that were coming, not just theories, but, experimental outcomes that were revealing the particles that are in the Standard Model. So, these were amazing times for physics. This was the glory days. In the 80s, there was a bit of a revival because the Russians were still at it. But Sheldon Lee Glashow, another Nobel Prize-winning physicist, wrote some papers about mirror particles. So it wasn't taken incredibly unseriously. And a guy called B. Holdham wrote about how the electric charges could work their way into normal life, that you might be able to get some tiny ordinary electric charge from mirror particles because they appear to mix. There's a kind of mixing between ordinary and mirror photons. So there might be a tiny electric charge. Again, a little bit of hinting at the fact that they might have some interaction with the actual universe.
Yeah.
So, but in the 90s, you get the heyday of mirror particles. So the one person whose name keeps cropping up time and time again is Robert Foote. And he wrote a paper called A Model with Fundamental Improper Space-Time Symmetries with H. Liu and R. Volkas. So Robert Foote's from Australia, and he seems to be a massive advocate of the theory. And he wrote a book called Shadowlands, Quest for Mirror Matter in the Universe.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
He's publishing a lot of papers on it, and
he's gone full mirror, hasn't he? He's gone full mirror.
He's Spock with a beard.
Spock with a beard, full mirror, looking in the mirror.
He's gone full mirror. He's so there's another guy, Zurab Berenjani, and he also writes probably more seriously considered mirror theories as well.
These guys have the most symmetrical beards that you'll ever see.
I think, yeah, I bet Surab Berejani does symmetrical beard. But we should talk about the bullet cluster quickly,
okay?
Because if these mirror particles are interacting enough with our universe, then there is a chance that they could be what constitutes dark matter, that there might be mirror stars and mirror planets and things like that in the halos of galaxies that are causing the stars to be moving as fast as they are, creating this extra gravity needed to hold the galaxies together without them all flying apart, which they would do. So you've kind of got a choice. It's either modified theory of gravity or there is dark matter. You've got a choice. Now, the bullet cluster kind of pushes it into there must be dark matter kind of realm, because the picture of the bullet cluster clearly shows the dark matter, which you can see because of its gravitational lensing of objects behind, is actually pulled away from the shiny stuff, from things like stars and all the actual matter that you can see with your naked eye.
Yeah.
And so we know that they're pulled apart. But if dark matter is mirror matter, then mirror stars must be more prominent compared to the mirror gas than ordinary stars are compared to ordinary gas. Now, for me, that seems improbable if we go unless there's some underlying law in the mirror particle universe that's different to ours.
I mean, why wouldn't
Why
there
would that be the? Yeah, I just don't know. I don't know. But there's all Zurab also suggests that some of these gamma ray bursts, which are GRBs, might be merging mirror matter stars or collapsing mirror matter stars.
Goodness me.
And that's what. So yeah, so there's a whole bunch of things that mirror matter could be doing.
Just as that, because when I first started reading, I thought it might be quantum entanglement, because it's spooky action at a distance, which coincidentally is the name of the court case with my ex-girlfriend. But yeah, quantum entanglement, I thought it could be to do with that. How it's sort of like, you can have two particles on the other side of the universe, both can move and at exactly the same time and communicate instantaneously. But I don't think it's anything. Is it to do with that? I don't know, Matt. I don't know.
I really don't think so. No, I think really all it's saying is maybe you can have matter that a bit like antimatter.
Yeah.
But it's mirror matter. It's there. It just doesn't interact with us.
It's mirror matter for every bit of matter in the universe.
Yeah. So every single thing that we have in our universe that constitutes matter, you have a mirror version of it, which means that the mirror universe will be behaving in the same way, i.e. creating galaxies and creating stars and planets and humans, which I think is why, we could go. I mean, there's been some recent experiments to try and probe down into whether there is this mirror matter, and one of them is run by Leah Broussard at Oak Ridge, and there's another experiment called Murmur and things like that, which are basically, you have a nuclear reactor that's spitting out neutrons, and some of those neutrons are going to be mirror neutrons, therefore will pass straight through the casing, the shielding that you've built. Whereas the normal neutrons won't; they're blocked by the shielding. Otherwise, everyone would die. But the mirror ones are getting through. But because there's a slight mixing, you might be able to pick them up as a very, very low signal, very small signal, almost buried in the noise, but it will be there. And so they've been running these very sensitive experiments to see if this will happen. Of course, the worst thing about it is the press, because of the way that I've just described this mirror universe where everything exists but slightly out of phase. It's a bit like all those Star Trek episodes where somehow there's just slightly out of phase. There's a whole bunch of people in the room with you, but they're just slightly out of phase with you. But this is like they're a mirror. The mirror is there, but it doesn't interact.
But I've been looking for a way to prove that angels do exist, Matt, and you just helped me with that. So thank you so much. I always did believe.
And I think this is my problem with mirror matter. This is it. It's my whole problem with it is, that just because it's falsifiable doesn't make it scientific. In other words, you can't just come up with a theory of some new particles, then give them some properties, and then say, I'm going to run an experiment and we might find them in this experiment. Get money for it and then not find them. I mean, and the worst thing about this is obviously, there was reason to believe that the Higgs boson existed, and they built the Large Hadron Collider, and hey presto, they found it. But they haven't found any other, proposed particle. And now they're thinking of building a larger collider at a massive cost to see if they can find these, theorized particles. But often there doesn't seem to be enough kind of reasoning about why these particles would exist other than they might exist.
Yeah.
It's like dark. There's dark matter. What can it be? And then just coming up with random, millions of random guesses. Obviously, to do the random guess, you have to be an amazing physicist. So you have to at least understand the physics and that your new particle that you've invented obviously has to fulfill quite a few things.
Yeah, I couldn't come in and say...
work math. No, yeah. I couldn't come in. It has to work mathematically, etc., etc. So there's no doubt that these people are clever, but it does seem to be motivated reasoning. It just seems to be a scattergun approach of trying to get to the problem, and maybe this is not the right approach at all. I don't know.
I appreciate the skepticism of that, but I guess, is there any other way to do this? It's theoretical physics. It is sort of the creativity of it, the imagination of it is maybe what might get us to these points. And there's loads of money out there for this sort of thing. It reminds me of working in the arts in the lead up to 2008. That was just the same thing. I think I'd like to be a Viking. Sure. Here's a load of money. It was great. But yeah, I mean, if there's the funding for it, if there are the people to do it,
I think there is lots of funding, because obviously people want to get to the bottom of dark matter. And I think that some experiments, if it's only a few million quid, seems like it's a bargain almost. If it sort of reveals that there's what dark matter is, but there isn't really much reason to doubt the standard model. It kind of explains everything.
Yeah.
It's just almost like people are upset that it's not neat.
Yeah.
and millions of pounds going into it. And surely millions of pounds would be better spent on observations and really honing down on the numbers of what dark matter would look like, in terms of there just seems to be a lot of observational astronomy that you could do for the cost of these crazy experiments that are really just testing out highly speculative theories.
It's just really like this obsession with symmetry. It's kind of like, spending millions and millions of pounds because a couple of these physicists have a tiny bit of OCD.
Well, I was thinking about, if I said to you, Earth is going to be hit by an asteroid tomorrow.
What?
It's a little bit, it's a little bit scientific, because we know that Earth's been hit by asteroids before, so it has some basis in. I have some reason to think it. But if I said we're going to be hit by a space elephant tomorrow, now I can put together a reasonable, hypothesis that, a bit like a Boltzmann brain, just because of some quirk of entropy, an elephant was made in outer space and it's going to hit us tomorrow.
Yeah.
But let's face it, I don't think it's a particularly scientific thing to say that we're going to be hit by a space elephant tomorrow.
It sounds a bit more like closer to Bertrand Russell's Teapot, this. But but with the space elephant, I've heard that sequel to Dumbo is actually in the can.
I quite like my space elephant.
It's good.
So do you want? So now we've learnt about mirror matter, and now I've decided to poo-poo it in the same breath. No, there are some good places to look at mirror matter. Wan Peng Tan of Notre Dame University writes a good blog about it if you're interested in it.
I am.
But so yeah, well, I'm glad you made me look at it, because I didn't realise how much it's considered a really good candidate for dark matter. But it's like there are no good candidates for dark matter. I think this is slightly less crazy than the information is dark matter one that we did. But still,
I like it. You know what? Well, I like it. That's all I'm saying.
I know you like it, and I like it too. I like it too. It's a nice little ramble on my birthday. I like it.
Oh yes, I hope you're having an amazing birthday.
It is. Well, how much better can your birthday get talking about mirror matter? I'm not sure. Well, it could. You could listen to Sarah Cruddas and Matthew Russell discuss space. Do you want to have a listen?
I would love to hear that. I'm really excited to hear it.
Okay, Foote.
The Interplanetary podcast, putting the ace back into space.
We're here again. We've got Sarah Cruddas back on the show. I don't know how many years later it is. It's 3 or 4. I literally can't remember. But we'll sort of...
I think it's either 2016 or 2017, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a long... Well, like we were saying earlier, it seems like a different era. So welcome to the show again, Sarah. How are you in lockdown?
I'm good. Welcome through the world of audio to my walk-in wardrobe / office now, which is the life of lockdown. But thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, we're very excited to have you back. So the reason why we've got you back on is you have a book, Look Up, that's coming out soon. First of all, when's it out and what's it all about?
Yeah, well, the book's called Look Up, Our Story with the Stars, and it is out this September. And it is... essentially the story, as the title says, the story with our stars, why human beings went to space, the stories of dedication, determination and sacrifice, which, the human stories about exploring space, then how space has transformed life on Earth. So the unexpected space age that we live in today through to the entrepreneurial space age. So I work in the commercial space sector as part of what I do, and how entrepreneurs are changing our future, our today and our tomorrow. And then looking at the final chapter, which is Look Back, which is essentially how the greatest thing to come from space is actually us, and it's Earth, and it's this new perspective, and how all that is wrong in the world, particularly when you look at climate science right now, how actually going to space gives us hope and the potential to actually solve the very hard challenges that we face at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really common brick wall that I come up against. And in fact, I had a raging argument with my mum about this very subject yesterday. A lot of people, when they hear about money going into space, and sometimes it's just a ridiculous argument, but when they hear about money going into space, they say, why, when we've got so many problems down here on Earth? How do you address that quickly as a thing?
Well, there's a long answer and a short answer, and I'll give the long answer and I'll try and shorten it depending on how long we've got on this podcast. But the long answer is I get it. So in my work as a journalist, I've been to places such as North Korea, the DRC, Goma is one of the worst places I've ever seen in my life. I've been to very horrible parts of the world, and actually my upbringing, I grew up in the north of England, living on benefits as a child in a single parent family. I understand that there are big problems in this world, and I think all of us in 2020 understand that. But at the same time, space isn't about, leaving Earth to escape our problems and ruin another planet. Going into space is actually all about Earth. It's about benefiting life on Earth. So the things we do in space benefit so many people on Earth. We live in this unexpected space age, one where, we expected jetpacks and flying cars. People who were around in the 60s will remember those. I wasn't around, but people will remember how, humans were landing on the moon. So we expected this crazy space future, and instead we got Deliveroo. But actually, we all live in a space age, in a world transformed for space. All of us who have a cell phone, a mobile phone, have a space receiver in our pocket. And if you're going to look at the money side of things, I think it's something like for every £1 you put into space, in the UK, for example, you get £10 back. But then if we look at the broader perspective, space technology is transforming lives across the world. Take Uganda, for example. A country, they don't have their own astronauts, but people grew up under the stars. I've worked in Uganda, people there grew up looking up at the stars, and they recognise how space technology benefits them, everything from providing the internet from space to, which essentially, if you look at Africa as a continent, actually, I think the majority of people now have their own mobile phones, but not everyone has access to the internet. But having access to internet doesn't just mean you can go on Facebook or social media. It means access to an education, access to business, access to opportunity, access to medical training. Just to skip to another country, Nigeria, for example, has one of the worst maternal mortality rates in the world. It's staggeringly high, but actually being able to access the internet from space instead of having to go through the complexities of putting the infrastructure on the ground, medical teams can receive training. They can receive advice when they're in a serious situation, and it can help improve the qualities of life. It can help reduce that mortality rate as one example. So that is a very long answer, but what I'm trying to say is that, we always attack space, but it's what we're doing in space is no different to what we've done on Earth. We've explored our planet. Governments have gone first, then private industry afterwards, and now the same is happening in space. And it's everything we do in space is about Earth. Yes, we are wanting to push the limits of where we can go and extend the presence of human beings, but we're doing it for the majority. And if we're to succeed in space, it has to bring benefit to the majority, which it does.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that it's, by the way, it's a really, really easy book to read. I think I really like the prose and everything, and it's one of those books that you can just get into and just pretty much rifle the way through. But I know it's very, very human space orientated, isn't it? It's about the sort of human story in going into space. But I know about space and the technology that we send to space and all the kind of amazing things we do with in science in space and Earth observation and all those things. But even for me, there's a little bit of a question mark about how much resources we stick into human space flight going into space. And a really good example would be India. Has got a fantastic space program, I think, and it clearly is one of those things that's making its economy worthwhile and bringing back money. But I worry that they're sort of starting a human spaceflight program, and maybe that's sucking up some of the resources that could have been doing all these amazing bits of work that you've just talked about. Have you got a sort of an overall view about alleviating those worries?
Well, we need to do both. So I need to, the proudest thing I have about this book is that the fact Apollo 11 astronaut Michael Collins wrote the foreword. And there's actually a story from that I want to use to explain this. And in his speech to Congress, after he'd been to the moon in 1969, I think it was September 1969, he talked about all the problems that were faced on Earth. And he talked about his own experience when they were on the way to the moon, and the Apollo spacecraft was rotating like a chicken on a barbecue spit, he described it at. And at one point they could see the Earth out the window, then they could see the moon, and they had the choice of looking either way, the moon, which represented the future and where history would be made in a couple of days, or looking back at Earth, which represented all of human history and where they'd come from. And Michael explained that the crew looked both ways. So they looked back at Earth with all the problems they faced, but they also looked at the moon because there were still problems raging on Earth in 1969 when we went to the moon. There were still problems throughout the history of humanity. Yeah. There's never been a time when we haven't had problems, but we have to keep exploring. We have to keep moving forward. So I can and Michael explained they look both ways. And that's what we need to do. We need to address issues on Earth, but we can't stay still. Stasis isn't good for a species. And by progressing forward, it benefits all. And you look at the world 100 years ago compared to the world now, and we're all of us are alive in the best time. Even though 2020 is a terrible year for so many, we're still alive in the best time. We've got the best technology we've ever had as a species, the best, most exciting stuff. And so when you look at robotic missions and human missions, nothing can replace humans going into space. The inspiration that comes from seeing human beings push the boundaries. Michael Collins uses this phrase, outward bound, and to push outward bound where we could go. What we're doing in space is nothing new. It's just the playing field has changed. So we've explored Earth. Governments have traditionally gone in first, then private industry afterwards. As we've done on Earth, we're now seeing the same thing in space. And, with this tiny, tiny, tiny planet, so insignificantly tiny, we can't even get our brains around it because it seems so big to us, our Earth. But on the scale of the universe, not even a speck. When you're beyond the solar system, we're not even a speck. So why wouldn't you want to explore? Why wouldn't you want to push those boundaries? And yes, we can send out robots, but to see humans, return to the moon, and this time to extend where humans live, not just to go and plant flags, take a few photos and have some footprints on the ground, but actually to go there, to extend. At the moment, we live on Earth, and then we've got the International Space Station, which obviously 20 years this year since it was first became permanently crewed. So we're extending where we can go. The next stop is the moon, but this time for a permanent crewed base, and then further human beings to Mars, and then we're just dipping our toes in the water. So with all the problems on Earth, and I understand it, we still have to keep exploring. And with that, you get so many other benefits, so many indirect benefits. You get, first of all, you get inspiration. Like the generation inspired by Apollo built the world we live in today, and you can't measure something like that. Imagine, take, for example, the Crew Dragon launch, which happened in May and then landed back on Earth in August. Think of the inspiration, someone who's a young kid who's sat at home. How will that define their life? And they might not become an astronaut or a rocket scientist, but what will that inspire them to create that we cannot yet imagine? Just like people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk were inspired by the moon landings. And we have to keep on exploring it. It's in our DNA, but we have to recognise where we came from and realise that if we do so, we can't afford to leave everyone out, because today the majority of people who've been to space are white and male. And if we're going to go to space and continue expanding where we are, because that's in our DNA, it's what makes us human, we need to represent everybody on Earth, because space has to be about everyone. So I welcome the idea of more countries having access to space. Yes, there are problems on Earth, but not going to space is not going to stop that, because in going to space and sending humans to space, we solve really hard problems, and that in turn has benefits for life on Earth. There's always going to be people who disagree, but we have to keep on exploring. The world we live in today is thanks to those who push the boundaries of where we could go.
Yeah, there was one interview that I heard with Andrea, Carl Sagan's wife, and it's really stuck with me about this message of we need a destination, as in terms of humans having a conversation, humankind having a conversation about where we want to go as a species, so that we can actually build a roadmap to that. And ever since I've heard that message, I've been thinking maybe that, as science communicators, maybe that's the bit that sometimes we miss out, because we're so enthusiastic about the subject and the kind of the way that we're moving in the bus or the plane or however we're doing the journey, and we forget about ultimately why is it that we want to explore? Why is it that we want to sort of push out into the cosmos?
Because it's what makes us human. It's the reason that we live in the world we live in today, because of our ancestors who explored and pushed the limits. Who were curious about what was on the other side of the hill. It's what makes us human, and it's what's created our society of today. And actually, although I'd agree with the point about having a roadmap, what I would say is, space isn't, sometimes the media get confused because they talk about a new space race now, but there isn't, because it's no longer, you look back to the space race, which I talk about in the book, actually, because it's important to always tell that story, because everything we do in space is owed to those first pioneers. But if you look back to the space race, there was a very clear goal defined by Kennedy, go to the moon. But what we're seeing today is that there's multiple things, like, the sky is no longer the limit, space is limitless. But I agree, we need that kind of there's no longer a race to one destination. There's lots of companies and countries both involved in doing lots of different things, everything from potentially mining asteroids in the moon for rocket fuel, to sending human beings to Mars, to moving manufacturing off Earth and using data to benefit Earth. But I think, if we are going to tackle those really hard challenges, we need to have that succinct Kennedy-esque goal, that JFK-esque goal, and a clear mission statement. But I do wonder whether our Apollo moment, certainly this half of the century, obviously Artemis, seeing humans return to the moon, seeing the first woman on the moon, and hopefully seeing a time where women no longer have to break barriers for women, but actually for humanity. But I would argue that tackling climate change would perhaps be our next Apollo-esque moment, and using we had to go up to understand what was going on our Earth. It is thanks to space-based satellites and astronauts in space that we know about our Earth's changing climate, and we get more and more data, so we can make important decisions about how to react to this in the future. So I would argue that one of the biggest goals that we need to look at, and perhaps have a clearer roadmap, is how to combat climate change and to have that Apollo-esque mission. But it's two parts. In part, I agree with you because I think we have to defined goals, and certainly, but at the other end, it's space is limitless, and it's a place where we can dream the impossible and go out and make it happen. And we're just such a tiny part of something. And I think with all that's wrong with 2020, space gives us hope because you can just look up at the night sky. That's why I called the book Look Up, because it's accessible to everyone. And everything you can imagine probably exists out there, as well as all the things you can't imagine. And I realise this is a really long-winded answer, but I both agree and disagree. But I think we just need to we need both a defined roadmap, but at the same time to recognise that this is like something we've never seen before, that the possibilities are just limitless to come. And we have to appreciate there's no final destination. Like it's just extending where we can be.
Sometimes it's a frustrating message to get across when you're so enthusiastic about a subject that you want to bring everyone along with you, but you understand that they can understand that there's lots of other problems, climate change. To bring space into that issue, I think is quite simple, isn't it? Because we wouldn't really know the things that we do know about climate change without European satellites and all the money that we spent on space.
Well, yeah, the satellites across the world, and I think but I would say that most people are interested, most children are interested in space. Most people are that's what kind of like sparked my enthusiasm as a child, just looking up at the moon. All of us have that curiosity about space. All of us want meaning in our life. You know, space is as much about philosophy as it is about science, because it's about asking questions about, you know, where did we come from? Why do we exist? Are we alone in the universe? The biggest questions. And I think it's easy for people to get sidetracked in their day-to-day lives. I mean, I'm as guilty as the next person. But actually, I would argue that all of us have it in us. All of us have that curiosity in us still. And, you know, I challenge anyone just to go outside and look up at the night sky and not be inspired and not feel curious. Like you mentioned, looking at the comet, that's incredible. Do you know, I didn't see the comet. Every time I tried, it was either cloudy or I was back in London and it was full of light pollution. But I love seeing the International Space Station. So at the start of lockdown, the March, April time, the really dark days of lockdown, it was a great time to see the International Space Station. And it's like, the one thing you have in common with every single human being that has ever existed is we've all looked up at the same stars. We've all looked up, and we've all looked up at the same stars. And the difference is now when we look up at the stars, there's human-made objects there. So we see human-made, you know, pieces of humanity which have, you know, figuratively touched the stars. That are, you know, human-made stars. So looking at the International Space Station and knowing that there's human beings, like there's 3 astronauts on board the space station at the moment, looking back at us, and that's an incredible, humbling kind of. And what I love about seeing the ISS is you can also watch in real time what they're looking back at, so you can see their view of Earth as you're looking up at them, which is just mind blowing. Yeah,
that is mind blowing. Yeah, one of my favourite moments was during the centenary of the end of the First World War. They were projecting images on the big building in Ilfracombe, lots of pictures of the trenches and stuff like that. And the ISS flew over as I was watching. I was thinking, that's incredible. There's a Russian, an American, a German, a couple of Russians, an American and a German on board. And I was thinking, that really should be an amazing moment where it's not only are we out in space, but we're out in space in perhaps the most incredible international collaboration that shows what you can do if you put aside all your differences.
Well, this is one of the things I love about the International Space Station. So I and I don't claim to be the person who first said this, but I've always said that the International Space Station is worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize, because you've got countries. I think it was Jan Werner I got this from. So Jan Werner, who's the Director General of the European Space Agency, when I worked with him at a few events, but the ISS is worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize because you've got countries which might not necessarily get on Earth, you know, historically haven't got on, but working together in space, because actually what we do in space is greater than any one country, any one individual. It's the most arduous, complex challenge we've ever faced, because human beings aren't designed to go to space, yet we're so curious we want to go there. So space, and I think it's interesting actually, because this year the International Space Station has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize after quite a few years of saying it now. And it's, you know, I'm not naive enough to say that it's completely harmonious in space, but we have got a huge amount of collaboration. And you think you look back to the Apollo Soyuz in 1975, which you saw that handshake in space between two rival superpowers, and how they could collaborate off Earth, and we're seeing it today. For all that's wrong in the world, we collaborate in space and we work together. And I think that it gives me hope that although humanity is not perfect, when we really face these really difficult challenges, almost kind of like what we're going through with COVID right now, the challenges and the collaboration that we're seeing with that. But when we face these great challenges, we work together, and it gives me hope, because when we're in space, of course, astronauts, cosmonauts, taikonauts, whatever you want to say, they all wear their country's national flags, but they all call the same planet home. They all call Earth home. I talk about this in the last chapter of my book, actually, because when astronauts return from space, it doesn't matter where they land. So they might land in Kazakhstan, but they're Americans. They still say welcome home, and they're still welcome home, because in space, Earth is our home. Like you go back, you're in Earth orbit, 250 miles up on the ISS. You can't see the borders. You can make out some countries, but you can't see the borders that divide us. Go to the moon, 250,000 miles. We're just one planet is home, one planet which you can cover with your thumb. So I think space has the potential to unify us in ways, and a realisation that we are all in this together, that we are divided on Earth, but actually in this vast, impossible universe, we all call the same planet home. And if we don't look after it, we're going to be facing many, many more challenges. And in order to look after it, we need to work together.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that that's why the stories of astronauts become more important in some way, because they've actually lived through that collaboration? Because I noticed when you talk to people like Mike Foale, he actually the thing he says is things like he misses his Russian comrades on Mir. That was the one thing that he misses the most is his friends. So that sort of make that they all sort of have this international community in space, and their story is one of that overview effect.
Yeah, I agree. And Mike Cole, wow, with that fire on Mir as well. I mean, he's a British. He was born in Lincolnshire. He's a British person who moved to America to follow his dreams of space. So there's already some like international isms. Is that a word? But no, I agree. I think space is just it gives us a realisation that we're all in it together. And actually, you touched on an important point about learning from the stories of astronauts. I talk a lot about one of the chapters in my book, Dedication, Determination and Sacrifice, talks about the astronauts. I pick out a few different people, one of them being Gus Grissom, another Christa Mcauliffe, who was a teacher who's obviously sadly killed on the Challenger disaster. But I grew up in the outskirts of Hull, didn't have very much money, first in my family to ever go to university, no influence of science, but actually learning about the stories of astronauts as a kid and what you can achieve with hard work, determination, and how you shouldn't let where you come from actually inspired me in my own career, and it inspired me to work hard and to realise that nothing's impossible. I read about human beings walking on the moon, and I think a lot of people talk about inspiring kids with space, but we need to inspire adults as well, because all of us have complex lives, don't we? And I think learning about the stories of astronauts, what they've overcome and why they've dedicated themselves to something so removed, I guess, from day-to-day life, such as going to space, and why they've, or anyone within the space industry, it's not a 9-to-5 job. And I think learning about the adversity that people have faced, how they've overcome it, and how you can achieve impossible things can inspire a lot of people, no matter what age they are in life or what stage they are in life, because space is more, it's going into space is a lot of things, but it is also a human story. And that's a very important story which can inspire you, whether you want to become a scientist or not. I think it can just inspire you in your own life, because we are all human at the end of the day. Yeah,
I think that point probably answers my really earlier point about
I just like going on tangents.
It answered that really earlier point about why we should be sending, really concentrating on the human element of space. And I really get it in terms of that is the thing that is inspirational, but it also kind of plants it in the human experience, doesn't it? I mean, when we talk about Voyager and when we talk about Cassini, they're bits of metal out in space, and I wonder how you can. It's very hard, isn't it, to connect to it? And I know people like the European Space Agency have made their satellites more sort of accessible by giving them faces and characters when they do those.
Makes
sort
a big
of cartoons.
difference doing that. I really,
yeah, no, absolutely.
And then them having their like Rosetta and Philae, that was the best
that was
example.
beautiful, yeah.
Like, and I think we need to talk more about how we communicate space, because we can do all these great things, but if we don't tell people about it, people aren't going to understand why it matters to them. And actually turning Philae and Rosetta, which were these two spacecraft who went to the comet Churyumov-Gerasimenko, I've had to say that quite a few times.
Yeah.
They humanise something, but also it's important to remember that, you know, we've sent robots beyond our solar system now. If you look at the Voyagers, but like nothing can replace human boots on the ground. You know, if we're looking to go to Mars within the next 20 or 30 years, perhaps even sooner. One of the reasons we want to go to Mars is because we want to look for that clinching piece of evidence to find out whether life once existed, or perhaps even microbial life still exists on Mars today. Something which is game-changing. It will be the most profound discovery of all of humanity, to either prove that we're not alone in the universe, to get that, because, you know, as Carl Sagan once said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and we haven't quite got it yet, or even though it's highly likely that there might have been life on Mars in the past, or might still be life. But also, you know, robots can't do that. So that's a discovery which changes all of humanity, but robots can't replace a person being there and having their dexterity, their ability to look out and see that rock, and their training. You know, robots are acting as a delay when communicating with a robot. And if we want to do that, we want to prove that we're not alone in the universe, or that we're in fact related to life on Mars, which could be the case. Yeah. Also, life on Earth could have been seeded by life on Mars. We need to, during the early solar system, we need humans there to get that last bit of evidence. And also, then we'd be, even if we don't find evidence of life on Mars, then we're a two-planetary species, and we're no longer bound to one Earth. We finally, you know, just as early explorers, like the prologue of my book talks about how, you know, early explorers cast off from the quayside even. it's the morning, it's a Thursday. You know, we're doing the same thing. We're casting off into the ocean that is the cosmos, and we have to do it. You know, even if we don't find evidence of life on Mars, there's still plenty of other places where, even within our own solar system, where life could still exist right now. But it means we've stepped away. We've cast off from that cosmic quayside into the cosmic ocean, and we're now sailing in a new sea. And it's our gift to the future to keep on exploring. It's our gift to future generations to keep pushing forward, to keep extending where humans can be, and to keep exploring. Like, life gets better when we explore and when we push the limits of what humans can do.
Yeah,
and just why wouldn't you want to do it?
Yeah, no, exactly. I love the idea of, we deserve, the future generations, deserve that we push forward. But I also love that idea that all the people that went before us, all the people that, all those hard-won bits of physics, the fact that people fought in the Second World War, the fact that Gus Grissom died, and you've got all these people that are just, you owe it to them as well, the sort of the human project that is behind us, and for the human project that's in front of us. We can't be the generation that let everyone down. Yeah,
exactly. And I'd like to touch on Gus Grissom, actually, because he was... I remember reading about Gus Grissom as a kid, and he was kind of like this, grew up very poor in Illinois, didn't look like your typical hero, worked flipping burgers 30 hours a week while studying at college to eventually go and fly in the Air Force. Ended up, obviously had a Mercury flight, commanded the first Gemini flight as well, was meant to have command of Apollo 1, and there was talk, obviously, and it depends how much people know about this era of space exploration, but Deke Slayton, in one of the original Mercury 7, he was meant to go to space, obviously didn't, so he headed up the astronaut office, and he was in charge of crew rotations, and there was an element of, it wasn't an exact science how these crew rotations worked out, and there are rumours that he wanted a Mercury 7 astronaut to be the first on the moon, and that person was Gus, and of course Gus died in the Apollo 1 fire, on the ground in what was at the time seen as a routine test. and he never got to walk on the moon, and not many people know about him. You could argue that he failed. He failed in this dream for the moon, but actually he didn't fail, because his death, although tragic, enabled America's, and humanity's greatest success in space exploration. We were only able to go to the moon because of the sacrifices of Gus Grissom and his crewmates Ed White and Roger Chaffee. It was because of them that no American was lost in space during Apollo. So it was the lessons learned. And so we hear about the heroes in space exploration. We hear about Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, for example. We hear about the real success stories. But behind them are people who gave their lives for this, people who paid the ultimate price because what they were chasing, what we're doing in space, is worth the sacrifice. And even, so that's why I think it's important to tell the stories of people like Gus Grissom, because to remember why people gave so much for this. And of course it was a Cold War during then, but then you have more modern stories as well, like space is dangerous. I think with Crew Dragon right now, and with the commercial crew programs that also includes Boeing and the Boeing Starliner, I think it's a 1 in 272 fatality rate is what they kind of aimed for. But still, that's not great odds. No, it is still dangerous. No, we take space for granted because we see it on the news now, and it's we know that people have been to the moon, but actually it's still so risky. People are risking their lives because they're pursuing something greater than themselves. And even the people who are on the ground are dedicating their lives to something greater than themselves. So I think it's important, no matter what we do, to remember those who came before us. And that's, I guess, why having Michael Collins write the foreword, just because nothing we do in space would be possible without the likes of Michael. They gave up. They went places no human being had. They literally went to the moon. In 19...
it's mind blowing.
And you say it
it's like what? He went to the moon.
We live in a time. I learned about the moon in history books. More people are there. The people who actually remember Apollo are getting fewer and fewer and fewer. But to push that limit of, to take humans beyond Earth, to go into space for the first time, to go to the moon, everything we do is owed to those first few. And of course it was a conflict that enabled that, but what came from it was the modern world we live in today and all the benefits. You want to get a car to go somewhere, you use your space receiver in your pocket, which is your cell phone, to call that car, but that car is using satellites to find your location. So it's everything we do and everything we benefit from today is owed to those first pioneers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it plays into that future as well. George, my son, came up with a brilliant one yesterday about, if someone dies, like Gus Grissom's death enabled people to get to the moon. But if we get to Mars, Gus Grissom's death enabled humans to get to the moon and to Mars. His sacrifice becomes more meaningful.
Everything we do in space is owed to those who first took those risks. But each voyage we're doing is getting more daring. I can understand the frustration, people who are like, why haven't we been back to the moon? All we do is live in Earth orbit. But we live in Earth orbit. Before Apollo was just over a week. That was it. The longest we were on the moon, Apollo 17, was something like 72 hours. We had 3 days living on the moon. That was it. And then we haven't been back since December 1972. But for the last 20 years, we've had humans living in space, permanently. We've had a continuous roster of crews living in space permanently. We've had humans spend a year in space, a year of their lives. I like to call it 2020 because it feels like we're all in our spaceships whilst in isolation right now. Yeah. But in all seriousness, we've had human beings living in space, learning how to overcome those hurdles. And actually, you mentioned the benefit of space for life on Earth. And one point I haven't touched on is things like, some of the science we're doing in space is about the human body, because you take away gravity, you're taking away a variable, so you can study things in a different way. For all intents and purposes, you take away gravity because, of course, there's still gravity in space, but I'm sure you know what you mean. Yeah. But in that microgravity environment, we can study cancer cells, and they behave differently in space. They behave more like how they would in the human body. And actually, another kind of story of sacrifice is the crew of Columbia, which was lost in 2003 when they returned to Earth. And some of the work they were doing on that space shuttle mission. So for those who don't know, this was a mission in 2003 which launched, but during launch there was some damage to the heat tiles on the leading edge of one of the orbiter's wings, and as it returned to Earth it disintegrated over Texas and Arkansas and Louisiana because you'd lost some of the heat protection and all the crew died. It was a tragic story. And testament to the sacrifice and the risks that astronauts are prepared to take. But part of the work they were doing was into cells, cancer cells, in this unique environment of space, which has huge benefit for cancer research on Earth, because you can test drugs in space in a way that more accurately represents the human body than on Earth. So we're doing this hugely important work, and that research was thought to have been lost alongside the crew when Columbia tragically disintegrated, but actually a box with many of the experiments in was recovered, and scientists were able to continue the work that the crew were doing. So work into cancer, which is something which affects all of us at some point in our life in terms of either knowing someone or getting it ourselves, is being benefited by space exploration, and people have literally paid the ultimate price to continue that research. And I think it's important to remember that. I can't remember what question we started with.
No, I can't. No, well, I've got a new question for you. When you were researching your book, what did you uncover a piece of information or a story that blew your mind? What was the highlight of your digging? Do you know, it's something, because this book is kind of like, I was literally allowed to write what I wanted. I am so grateful to HQ, Kate Fox, who was my editor at HQ, because she just kind of like believed in me, and I had this crazy idea, which was just like all my love of space. So like why I love space, how we've got to now, what's happening now, where we're heading in our future, and the human story. So it's kind of like a mishmash almost, this book, but it's my passion. But so a lot of it was stuff which has defined my life, or the commercial space sector that I work in. But for me, actually, it goes back to this chapter, Dedication, Determination and Sacrifice, which is more of the human chapter. Actually, I'm going to tell two stories, but the first one is about this one. And I wanted to write about an astronaut called Judy Resnick, who was killed in the Challenger. But I couldn't quite get the story to match. And I've written about Judy before. So then I started investigating some of the other Challenger astronauts. And a lot was written about Christa Mcauliffe. So she was the teacher in space, and I thought that's quite a cliche story. People have heard of her. So she was the first teacher in space who was tragically killed aboard the Challenger. But then when I started looking up and really diving deep into her story, I realised she was an extraordinary human being, and more people needed to. All of them who lost their lives in the Challenger were extraordinary. But Christa, you just hear about because she was a teacher, but you don't hear about everything else about her. And it was only when I kind of like dug deep, watching like hours and hours of interview footage of Christa, that, you know, she described herself as an ordinary person, and in her lessons in school, so she was a historian and a social studies teacher, and in her lessons in school, before she became this woman who's going to become like a space flight participant, so to speak, she was never actually an astronaut, she was a space flight participant as the first teacher in space. She used to talk about the common man, as she described it, and how throughout history it's easy to record military history or economic history or of great leaders, but actually the common man gets forgotten throughout history, because for a long time, now it's different, we have social media, but for a long time there were no records. So she used to encourage her students to go out and do oral history projects, to go and interview people within their community. And her whole aim of taking part in this Teacher in Space program was to show that the ordinary person was contributing to history. And I think that's a really important message to have, because her aim was to, in an era long before social media, to write the first diary from space of an ordinary person's perspective, of a teacher's perspective of what it was like to go to space. And she wanted to show her students that the ordinary person counts, the little person counts. It's not just the great military general or a great leader, but the little person counts. All of us count, and all of our contributions count. And that was her kind of inspiration behind applying to be a teacher in space and getting selected for this program. And, you know, her death and the Challenger tragedy was horrific, but there are Challenger centres around the world now today. She
has had a huge impact, myself included. Like, I don't remember Challenger. I was 1 year old, but I was, you know, I attended a Challenger Centre as a child. I was inspired by learning about her story, and it's only when I delved deep, I was just so in awe, and it really got me thinking, because we all, in an era where everyone's striving to be, or many people are striving to be famous, social media celebrities or reality TV stars, actually, you don't need to be that. You just need to be yourself, and that the little person counts, and you can be that ordinary person, and the things you do in your day-to-day life are changing history. And I'm not telling everyone to go out and be an astronaut, but I think Christa was just this ordinary person who did an extraordinary thing, and I think we can all learn from that and to do extraordinary things in our life. And then the second story, very quickly, is about the Voyagers, the two twin spacecraft which were launched in the 1970s. And what I had to double check this because I didn't realise it was true, but when we're gone and when our sun's gone and our Earth's gone, so millions of years from now, those Voyagers will likely still exist. So two pieces of humanity will be out there in somewhere in the cosmos. Even if we don't ever explore space again, even if we cease to do that, there's two relics of humanity that will outlive our solar system, and that's just an incredible fact. I like to talk a lot about space.
No, that is awesome. And yeah, do you know what? I never even thought about that. But that, yeah, because I know it's going to take them a very long time to even go anywhere near our nearest star. I know that's always a depressing fact, but that's a good fact. I like the Voyager fact. That's I mean, back to Christa Mcauliffe. I mean, I was a young child inspired by Christa Mcauliffe. I remember it very, very well. I used to watch the Challenger take off, and obviously that was tragic. I remember it very, very, very well as a child. But I've noticed actually a lot, and you'll know this better than me, the sort of current batch of NASA astronauts, is it 12 women? Virtually everyone I've ever read about always cite Christa Mcauliffe as being the influence that sort of got them into space flights.
This batch of astronauts now are probably
that age,
40-ish, early 40s, so they would have remembered the Challenger, because they'd have been about 7 years old or so, 8 years old.
Yeah. So I think, and it's obviously, it might be one of those women that are the first people back on the moon. So it's like Christa Mcauliffe's again.
Yeah, I didn't mean for this to be a morbid conversation talking about the people we've lost, and I don't mean it, but I think it's like, you don't realise the impact you can have on life, just by trying to do something, I guess, just by, not succeeding in your dream still inspires others. And what I love about, so I'm split, I'm half in the TV industry in the US, but I'm also half within the space industry. And what I love about space is the collaboration that you see, I have so many friends within the space industry because we're all working towards this common goal, and it's most of us will fail, most of what we do in space will fail, but it inspires the successes, and also failure's not a bad thing, and there's so many great stories of humans pushing the limits of what is possible, but also ordinary people just trying to do a thing which was impossible to them. Space shows us that there's no limits, and that you can achieve so much, I do work with the Astronaut Memorial I've done some work with the Astronaut Memorial Foundation in the US, and I talk about this in the book. What gets me is you walk into this office and you see there's a wall of photographs, and they represent every single person we've lost in pursuing space. And it's kind of it almost stops you in the tracks, because as a kid they were adults, but now they're not that much older than me. And I've been lucky enough to age, I guess. And I guess as we continue to push forward in space, the number of names, the number of faces is going to grow, but so is the value of what we're chasing. And you're all going to die at the end of the day, but it's how you live your life which matters, and what you're working towards that matters.
Well, we're staying on the morbid thing.
I know. The book's got lots of positive stories in as well. We're just focusing on one chapter.
Well, I think, I like to see them as positive stories. But we always ask this of guests is, if you were to bring back someone like a past hero so that they could see where we are now in terms of here's the story now, what do you think? Who would you bring back from the dead as either a science hero, a space hero, or anything? You can bring back anyone.
Oh, that's such a difficult question, because there's people such as Wernher von Braun, but then I wouldn't want to bring him back now because Wernher von Braun kind of like was the brains behind getting humans to the moon in the US, but like we haven't been to Mars, so I wouldn't want to bring him back yet because I think he'd be very upset to know that we haven't been to Mars yet because he had plans for that in the 1970s. And then, you know, obviously people like Gus Grissom, Christa Mcauliffe, it would be great to show them, you know, Gus, that we did get to the moon sort of thing. So perhaps Gus Grissom would be mine to say, you know, to show, you know, because his is such a almost like unheard of story because he had a hard time in the press after his first Mercury mission because the door blew open. He was blamed by some in the media for flipping the chicken switch, even though he didn't. He's had some vindication with that since. But I think he would be one of them. But I think also at the same time, would you not want to go further back in history? Would you not want to go to someone like, let me think, give me a second to think. Copernicus, for example, like he first said like the Earth is at the centre of the solar system, or Jules Verne, who wrote stories about humans being to the moon. Like I write about this in the book as well. There's a lot in the book. I don't know how I managed to fit it all in, but like Jules Verne, who more than nearly, I think 100 years before humans actually went to the moon, don't quote me on that exact number, wrote about a voyage to the moon, which took off from Florida and splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. He dreamed this impossible dream.
Isn't it with 3 people as well?
Yeah, with 3 people.
It's just crazy.
And he predicted the moon landings in the 1800s. He was talking about this voyage to the moon. So just to, you know, and that book inspired Le Voyage dans la Lune, which was obviously one of our first movies, which showed the very iconic image of the rocket going into the moon's eye, which, you know, bring an artist back, because space isn't just about science. I would bring Jules Verne back and show him these, because we need dreamers, and what we do in space is beyond just the scientists and the engineers. We need obviously we need those, that are very essential, but we need people from all kinds of backgrounds. So bring Jules Verne back and show him one of his dreams came true. One of the stories that he told is no longer science fiction; it's become science prediction.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a good one. Jules Verne, yeah, that it's extraordinary. It takes off from Florida and splashes down. It's just
this is what I love about space. It's all the things you can imagine can come true, and all the things you cannot imagine. Like there's a planet out there made of diamonds. If you want a planet chocolate, technically it could exist. Like it's beyond the realms of the imagination. So yeah, bring back a great dreamer and show him, and then maybe he could dream up the next 100 years, 200 years for us.
And our final question is, do you have any space music?
When I got the email about this, I was like, I'm not massively into my music. I kind of like, listen, I get into some songs. I know you're going to kill me. But like, I just kind of listen to what's on the radio, and I have like a song which I really like, and then I'll listen to it on repeat for like a week, and then I'll be sick of that song. Like,
Tim Peake had "Don't Stop Me Now," I think, or something like that.
That's not a space song, though. I would.
Well, it has got some space lyrics in there.
I kind of like. Is it Coldplay? The Sky Full of Stars.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like you're not a Coldplay fan. I can see them.
No. Do you know what? I am a Coldplay fan. I've got lots of friends who work for Coldplay, so I can't possibly say that I'm not. No, they are. I know. I've got a lot of time for them. Got a lot of time. It's a good choice.
Yeah, let's go with that, because otherwise my only other one is like Space Cowboy. This is literally off the top of my head. So after we've stopped recording, I'll instantly come up with a much better idea. Space Cowboy is probably my second choice. Jamiroquai Space Cowboy. So I would say Coldplay, Sky Full of Stars.
Okay, yeah, I don't think we've got that one on, but I think we have got Jamiroquai's Space Cowboy.
Okay,
bizarrely,
well there we go. I'm sorry, everyone.
But we'll put Coldplay on. No, that's totally fine with me. Is that so? Yes. So I have to say, I think just from the way that you're talking now, it's everything that this book is. It's your sort of super enthusiasm for space itself, condensed into a very, very readable book. Is there anything you want to add or say when it's what date it's exactly out?
Yeah, so it's out in the UK on September 17th. It's Look Up Our Story with the Stars. It's published with HQ, which is the branch of HarperCollins. It's got a foreword by Michael Collins, and I would, like, I know I've mentioned this, and I don't mean it to sound like a brag, but it is the greatest professional honour of my life, like, to have Michael Collins write that foreword. Like, as I mentioned, I just come from this very humble, not very wealthy, not very privileged background. And to realise that if I could go back 20 years and tell me in 19, maybe 15 years, like, and tell myself, like, that someone I learned about, someone who inspired me to do everything I've done in my life in terms of what I do, like, wrote a forward for my book, I wouldn't have believed it. And I just think that's what space teaches us, that you can dream the impossible and go out and make it happen. And I just wanted to express my gratitude to Michael Collins because, you know, I appreciate I'm the author about this book, but the book's, there's an element of me in it in the introduction and obviously my enthusiasm, but we owe everything to people like Michael Collins. So it is the greatest honour of my professional life. Like, I feel quite emotional about it, to be honest with you, but it is to obviously have that stamp of approval from him, but to be able to showcase his words. You know, Charles Lindbergh wrote the foreword for Michael Collins' book, and now Michael Collins has written the foreword for my book. This is a heavy burden. Like,
that's a good lineage.
Like, who am I going to write the foreword for? Like, I don't want to ruin this lineage.
You could write it for my book.
Yeah, there we go.
Yes.
But it just, Michael's 89 years old, and we need to never forget people like Michael and what they've done for humanity, because in a world obsessed with the Kardashians and Instagrammers and celebrities and selfieing, what really matters is those who don't seek the limelight, but are those who try and progress. We do things to progress humanity. In 1,000 years from now, you're not going to remember. So, and I don't mean to pick on anyone. People have got to earn a living, and I agree, but you've got to remember Apollo 11. It was the greatest thing that humanity achieved in the last century, and it took us to another world. It took us to the moon. 1,000 years from now, this is what this last century will be remembered for. So it is the great. I'm so grateful and so thankful to Michael for taking the time to do this, because it is a huge honour, and I just want to inspire everyone from as many different backgrounds that space relates to you. All you need to do is look up. You don't need wealth. You don't need connections. You just need to look up and feel inspired, and hopefully it can inspire you to do something in your life, you know, to follow your own moonshot.
Yeah, space is just super inspirational. And you've been very inspirational as well, Sarah. Thank you very much for coming back on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's been too long. It's been too long.
It has. I've been in America.
The Interplanetary podcast is alive!
There we go. There was the wonderful and lovely Sarah Cruddas. It was lovely. We did it over Zoom, and it was nice to see Sarah again after such a long hiatus.
And what wonderful dulcet tones she had.
We better wrap this up because it's going to get very long otherwise.
Okie doke.
Chris, do you know what the website is for the Interplanetary podcast? I
do indeed. The website that you need to go to if you want to hear more about this is interplanetary.org.uk.
I'm going to get you back next week as well, because I have the genius Eric Berger on a nice ramble about space and rocketry and stuff.
Oh.
So we'll normal service shall be resumed.
Oh, brilliant. That's unless there's a tirade on social media to have me removed.
Unless there is a tirade on social media to have you removed. And, of course, I wonder if there is a mirror Elon Musk.
Oh, my goodness. I think I saw him. He was in his Tesla X over in Norway.
If Elon Musk had a goatee beard, oh, my God.
Symmetry.
I think that might be the cover of this week's podcast, a picture of Elon Musk with a goatee beard and Mirror Man.
The mirror version of Elon Musk is a goat with an Elon Musk beard.
Do you know what? The thing that annoys me about Mirror Matter is the way that the science press deal with it. It's so over the top. Like, literally things like scientists are about to make a tunnel through to a mirror universe and stuff like that.
Is it any wonder that there's a bunch of science skeptics out there, because they've been reading all that going, that's not possible. But all the scientists are going, we know.
I know, but that's the annoying thing is I genuinely think, the more I've been doing this podcast, the more I've realised that, the science press, even the good science press like New Scientist, really over-egg science stories, and no wonder everyone gets bored and fed up with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the elephant in space one was ridiculous.
I know that. What kind of idiot would come up with that?
I've no idea. A Dumbo. That's all I can say.
So, Chris, what are you doing this weekend? Anything exciting?
This weekend,
stargazing.
Well, yeah, a bit of stargazing maybe. We're going to spend some time in Oslo before we head back to the UK for a couple of weeks. So yeah, spend some time with some friends in beautiful, beautiful Oslo. So very much looking forward to that. In fact, I'm heading off round about now.
Excellent. Well,
fantastic. How about you? With your birthday, have you got any super birthday plans apart from staff induction? I know that's like the highlight, but
yeah, it's a beautiful sunny day today, so I might after staff induction's done, or maybe I'll just put a picture of myself pretending to be in staff induction. I might go for a little walk and then do something for my birthday on Saturday. I think.
Lovely.
Like go for a meal or something like that. You know, at my age, there's not many options.
Well, it's a big one next year.
It's the big one next year, episode 254.
I'll be there.
Genius. Right. Bye, Smodcast.
Bye, Smodcast. Bye, Smodcast.